Welcome to everyone to today's session on the Möbius MAA Placement Test Suite. We'll get started in maybe just another 30 seconds while people settle in and get their internet connections all secured and everything. So start shortly. And we do have a lot to cover. So I would say that that's probably good. I've got 2:01 on my clock, so let's get going. Again, welcome everyone, and thank you for tuning in to today's webinar on the Möbius MAA Placement Test Suite. Today's session is called Place Your Students in the Right Math Courses. I'm Chelsea. I'm a manager of product marketing here at Digital Ed, and I support all of the initiatives driven by Johnny Zivku, the director of product marketing. We support the product and engineering teams, ensuring that customer needs are heard when developing products and are also reflected when handling activities like launches or other events like these webinars. We've got our little cartoons here so that if you happen to be on our website looking at blogs we've written, for example, you're now able to put a real face to our name when you see a blog. We have this cool deal at Digital Ed where if you write a blog, our wonderful graphic designer will draw you an avatar. So before we get into this great session, I know all of you are probably Zoom webinar experts by now, but I'll remind you of a few things anyways. This is a 30-minute session, and we'll save the last 5 minutes for questions. But if you have a question during the presentation, be sure to drop it in the Q&A section of your Zoom window, not in the chat. Stick it in the Q&A. We'll be sure to get to them at the end of the session, but if we do happen to run out of time, no problem. We'll be sure to follow up with you after the session. So we've got 4 sections to cover today. I'm going to cover the first one and give you a little bit of background on the partnership between Digital Ed and the MAA. Let me just check my other screen here. Wonderful. So I'm going to give you some background there, and we're actually going to get into what is the MAA. I'll give you some details there. I'm then going to hand it over to Johnny, and he's going to get into what is the Möbius MAA Placement Test Suite? What's the value there? Why would you care about it? Then he's going to get into a couple details about what makes up these math placement tests. Then he's going to switch gears and actually jump into Möbius and give you a real live demonstration of what the Möbius MAA PTS looks like inside of Möbius. So let's start with this background here, Digital Ed and the MAA. What's that all about? So the MAA, or the Mathematical Association of America, has been a recognized body for over 40 years. And it's the world's largest community of mathematicians, students, and enthusiasts. And it strives to further the world's understanding of math. As we all know, math drives society and shapes our lives. So to have this organization determined to advance the understanding of math and its impact on society is incredibly valuable. You can learn more about their mission here at their website of the MAA.org. So the MAA acknowledged Möbius by Digital Ed as their first choice for hosting their math placement tests online. And Johnny's going to get into a little bit more about what these appealing features really are. This partnership developed with the common goal of offering mathematics placement testing as a scalable, approachable, and efficient process for both the students completing the testing and the instructors and administrators delivering and grading those tests. With the educational opportunities today having such a global reach, this means that students are inbound to your institution from all over the world with a vast diversity of mathematical backgrounds. And so math placement testing allows institutions to properly assess these incoming students and place them in the right first-year math courses. This in turn leads to nurtured student success and deeper satisfaction with their education. It also then means that instructors are able to teach their courses to students with a knowledge foundation that's aligned to the curriculum, which then results in more streamlined course delivery. And so Möbius by Digital Ed comes together with the MAA, and this is the solution called Möbius MAA Placement Test Suite. So I'm now going to hand this over to Johnny, and he's going to get into why the Möbius MAA Placement Test Suite is such an excellent option for math placement testing. Over to you, Johnny.
Thanks, Chelsea. Yeah, so Johnny here from Digital Ed. I want to cover just a basic question we're wondering is why should we use the Möbius MAA Placement Test Suite by Digital Ed? Well, ultimately, it comes down to the fact that with our solution, you can ensure student success in introductory math courses. This is a huge part of the student's undergrad when they're especially taking courses in the STEM or they're in STEM programs in general. We provide unmatched value and service. We give you full control over your placement testing. And not only that, but the pre-built content from the MAA is superior and gives you peace of mind. Now, let me dive into that just a little bit more. What do I mean by these 3 bullet points right there? Well, first, let's talk about unmatched value and service. We have a very unique offering that we price per student per calendar year. What that means is if a student is using the Möbius MAA Placement Test Suite, they can do as many placement tests as they have to in a given 12-month period of time. Unlike a lot of the competition out there who price per student per placement test attempt, we don't charge you for extra attempts. We don't charge you for, if a student has to, if they had an internet problem and they couldn't resume, they don't have to pay an extra cost to take it again. It's all rolled into a single cost for the students. Not only that, but through the digital ed customer success and experience team, you get access to real support. We have real people on the line to talk to you over the phone or through email to answer your questions that come up related to placement testing. Now, how do we have superior content for peace of mind? Well, through the MAA, we have their decades proven successful placement tests digitized in our solution. These placement tests were created by experts across North America, and through that process, they validated them and did field testing at many different schools across the nation. With that in mind, the testing is authentic and it's all aligned to existing testing criteria across the United States and Canada. But how do you give you full control over this? Well, first of all, these placement tests, they're all very easy to administer to your students through the Möbius platform, of course. Now, all these placement tests, they're graded instantly. So as students complete the placement test, they get a result and next steps automatically. You don't have to log in and release grade. You don't have to review things. It's all done there on the platform. Not only that, but when students complete the placement test, in essence, all your students, you can review important data related to the questions themselves through our gradebook, our item statistics, and even Möbius Analytics to give you insight into where students did well and didn't do well as a whole. Now, because Möbius is an online platform, accessed through your web browser on any device, delivery is very flexible. Are you planning to do placement testing, where you give it to students to do at home before they come to campus? No problem. Do you want students to come to your campus to maybe a placement testing center or a lab and they'll do the placement test on site? Maybe you'll give them a device. Maybe they'll bring you their own device. Doesn't matter. No issues with Möbius. Or are you somewhere in between where you want to have a hybrid model? No problems again. The delivery options are endless with the Möbius platform. Not only that, and this is a very key component, is that the placement test provided to you from the MAA can be completely customized. You have the free options to change the delivery, of course, the time restrictions, the due dates, the feedback, etc. We can also customize the actual content within the questions. If you want to rephrase certain questions, remove questions, create your own questions alongside the MAA material, there's no problems there. We don't restrict you to this, black box that you cannot change anything. You have full control with this solution to change whatever you want to really align it to your courses that your students will be taking at your campus. So with that in mind, you might be wondering, okay, what about these pre-built placement tests from the MAA? Can I get some more detail about them? How do they operate? How are they delivered? Well, good question. The placement tests from the MAA come in 2 different types. The first is a skill-based test, and the second is a concept readiness test. Let me talk about skills-based first. This is more traditional in calculation, if you would. Students are asked more to solve things, to calculate this, to find that based off formulas and expressions and numbers. But they come in 3 different flavors. We call them standard tests, calculator-based, and algorithmic. A standard test is completely static. If you deliver a standard test to your entire class, they'll all have the exact same placement test, exact same questions, the exact same options, etc. Nothing has changed. Calculator-based is the same, completely static, except for the questions do need a calculator to solve them. They're more calculation heavy. The standard ones do not need a calculator. That's how they were designed. So those are the 2 options in terms of static tests where you want the same one for all your students. Algorithmic, as the name implies, means that the questions of the placement test contain variables or parameters that are randomized for each student. So they each get their own unique delivery of the placement test on the topic you're placing them on. Now, the concepts readiness test. You might be wondering, what's the difference between a skills-based test and a concepts readiness test? As I mentioned, a skills-based test is more traditional in calculations, solving this, finding that, calculate that. The concepts readiness test is actually created in the last 10 to 15 years in response to modern research done out of the ASU. The questions for a concepts readiness test are more um, theoretical, they're more word problems, they're more testing that, do you understand the concepts you would need to succeed in a course rather than testing you on skills you would need. So it's a different approach to it. We'll talk about it more in a couple of minutes, but that's the difference between the two. Now, these pre-built placement tests from MAA, they're structured with about, depending on the topic, 25 to 32 multiple choice questions per placement test. And each is between 35 to 45 minutes in length, depending on the number of questions and the difficulty. Now, for the standard and the calculator-based test, there are multiple test versions available to provide testing diversity should you need it. So, for example, if students have to do multiple attempts, or you want to deliver the same topic to hundreds of students at the same time, you can have test version A, B, C, and D, so they all have slightly different versions of the test. Now, each placement test covers a single topic listed here. For the skills-based, there's arithmetic and skills, 3 different flavors of algebra, basic, regular, and advanced, trig and elementary functions, and calculus readiness. For the concepts-based test, there's 2 different topics covered. The first is calculus concepts readiness, or CCR for short, and the second is algebra and pre-calculus concepts readiness, or APCR for short. So with that in mind, I'm going to jump right into Möbius and kind of give you a sample of how the platform looks, how students would consume the placement test and go through themselves, and how you as an educator or a teacher administrating the placement test, how you can customize these things for your courses. So with that, here on my screen, I'm going to switch to my Möbius site here, and I'm going to log in with my first account here, my good friend Bruce. So there you go. So I've logged in as Bruce Wayne, and I'm going to go into my placement showcase class. So here I'm logged in now as a student. My teacher is Clark Kent. I got a little message from them. Below that, though, is where I would consume the placement tests, right? So as a student, I can't just take whatever placement test I want from the MAA. There's 67 tests from the MAA. I can't take whatever one I want. I can only take the placement tests that have been made available to me from my teacher or administrator at my school. So with that in mind, you can see I have a few ones different here. Let me open up this calculus readiness test, if you would. So here, I'll go right into it, and I start it right here, question 1. Like I mentioned, they all contain multiple choice questions. I can see the question, I can choose what I think is the correct answer, and using the navigation on the bottom, I can go to the next question. You can see here, it just automatically goes to question 2. I can do the same thing. Now, what's great is this content does contain mathematics, symbolic math, if you would, and graphs and diagrams. So as they're going through it, math looks like math should look, right? The exponents look like exponents, fractions look like fractions. They don't have to decipher, LaTeX or MathML on the screen. It automatically renders it for you in the browser. And that's important because we find that a majority of students who are doing a placement test haven't been to university before. This is the first time they're doing a test, and you don't want a student's first experience to, cause them any type of undue stress or anxiety. You want it to be a pleasant experience. And with the Möbius solution through the MAA, we have found through our focus groups and testing with students that it's a very easy to understand environment, and students walk away feeling confident in their studies. Now, as I'm not going to go through all questions here given the time on today's webinar, but I will submit this assignment or this placement test for grading if you would. And notice that before I do it though, if I as a student, if I forgot to respond to a few questions, maybe I just, missed one, or I skipped it because I didn't know the answer, I don't automatically just miss the credit on that question. I am given an opportunity to go back and to respond to it so I don't lose that. Now, of course, I can always continue and forfeit that. And as I finish, this is the default from the MAA. You get a simple thank you message, and the expectation is that the educators and the administrators now would review the grades and tell the students, which courses to enroll in or to enroll them on their behalf. Obviously, it depends on how your school wants to deliver your placement test. We support all different models. But what if you want to tell the students what to do, by tell them which course to take, for example? Well, let's go to my CCR test here, which again is a calculus concepts readiness test. Now, I'm going to take this test. I'm going to, again, given the timing, I won't be able to respond to every single question here, but you can even see as I'm going through it that if you remember from the previous test, which is more calculation heavy, this one does contain more questions related to theorems, to corollaries, to two hypotheses, and you can see here that the questions become more word problem in nature. Here's one about planting tomatoes in a garden, and here's one about a circle's radius. It's more about, do you understand the foundations necessary, the concepts to succeed in calculus, right? So regardless, when I finish this test and click on submit, when I'm done, I do get a message now that tells me, based off my score, what's going to happen next, right? So that's great, is because with a placement test, as you know, there's a cutoff score. And if a student surpasses that cutoff score, they will be placed into a specific course. If they don't pass that cutoff score, they will be told to place into a different course. And with Möbius, you can make what happens next conditional depending on if they pass or fail that cutoff score. And that's what happens here, is based off my score, which I, hopefully you saw, I did not answer every question. I definitely did not pass a cutoff score. I am enrolled in single variable calculus math 101. If I got above the cutoff score, I would have been enrolled in math 111, which is advanced single variable calculus, right? So you can customize Möbius to not only can you customize the delivery of the tests and what questions are on there and due dates and feedback, but you can also customize what happens after they finish the placement test. You can even connect Möbius to your learning management system so that grades are automatically, they get automatically pushed to your LMS so that, students can be automatically enrolled in the courses. You can push them to your SIS as well if you want to through the Möbius API, so they can even be automatically enrolled into their courses. Very cool feature we have through various different options. So with that in mind, that's how the students will go through the platform. Like I mentioned, it's a very easy to use system. There really is no issues from a student's perspective. And if anytime they have, questions, we have a help window that opens up where they can go to the support portal. They can access help for placement testing right online. And it's things that you would expect here related to, how do I do the test? How do I access it? How do I even take the test? What do I do next after I finish it? And there's all these great articles they can then go to find things out. Of course, with that in mind, I do want to switch gears now and talk about how an instructor would use the Möbius MAA Placement Test Suite. So I'm going to log out here as a student. I'm going to log in with my teacher's account, which is Clark Kent. So with Clark Kent, you can see now I have a class where my role as instructor rather than a class that I'm taking as a student. So going into here, you'll see I have the exact same view as a student. So I see the class details, I see the welcome message, I see what tests I've made available to them. But at the top here, I have more menu options. And today I want to focus on this area called Content Repository. This is where you, as an educator, will spend time preparing your placement tests, reviewing them, and then distribute them to your students. So with that in mind, let me talk about these two different flavors again, the skills-based test and the concepts-based tests. So clicking on each folder, you'll get a list of all the available placement tests for each category. Here are all the ones for skills-based, and here are the ones for concepts-based. Now, you might be wondering, how do I decipher what, there's 67 tests. How do I know which one is which? It's pretty simple, actually. So for every single placement test, there are 4 different terms in the title of the placement test. The first is either going to be, skills or concepts. It'll say that or the other. You can see I have skills all down here. If I go to the bottom, I can see more for concepts right in the middle there too. The second term or keyword within a placement test title is the subject being tested on. So calculus readiness is listed here. If I scroll down, here's high school mathematics. If I scroll down, here's algebra, basic algebra, and so forth. That's what the second keyword is. The third keyword is multiple choice. That's what they all say today. All pre-built MAA placement tests say multiple choice. You might be wondering, okay, is there another option or is another option coming? It's a good question. There is some development efforts happening on free response placement tests where the students would respond with numbers and symbols and equations and formulas and expressions and so forth. Those are currently in development and will be released in the future. The fourth keyword is going to be either calculator-based static, algorithmic, or just regular, multiple choice static. What's the difference again here? As I mentioned before, static means that for this placement test I have hover over right now, the static test Form 1D for elementary high school math, if I were to distribute this to my students, they would all get the exact same test. Nothing has changed in the test. The order of the questions is the same, the text is the same, nothing's changed. Calculator-based, like I mentioned, is the same thing, except you do need a calculator to solve these questions. They're more heavy in calculation, and without one, it would take a while and wouldn't be fair to the students. And then the other type, like I mentioned before, is algorithmic. So here's one for trig and elementary functions. This means that the questions within this placement test, they contain some variables and parameters that are randomized for each student. So as an example, let me just preview this question to show you what I mean. This one is asking me if, what is the radian measure of an angle whose degree measure is 195 degrees. So in this case, I can obviously think about, what it means to have something pi over 2 and then add some fractions, etc., and figure it out. I click on refresh here, look at the numbers and the options in the multiple choice. I'd notice that they change. It's now 225 degrees. Now it's, 210, back to 225. It changes again on my screen. So every student gets a different version of the same question. That's what we mean when we say algorithmic. That's what we mean. It doesn't mean that the question is completely ripped apart and they all get a whole different question. It means that the variables and the parameters within the questions themselves are changed. So students do get a very similar test to each other, but numbers and expressions and values are going to be completely randomized across the board. So every student does get their own unique version of the placement test. Now, with that in mind, I'm going to reload the content repository here. Those are the way that you would navigate through them. Like I even showed you there, I didn't even mention it, but let me just talk about it. If you want to preview the test, if you click on the actual placement test, you'll see all the questions. You can try them out right here in the content repository, preview them, make sure they work properly. But if you want to actually, adjust the delivery of the placement test, maybe you want to change due dates and start dates and feedback options, open up the placement test and click on the edit button. So here, you're going to be taken to what's called the assignment editor. Now, I'm not going to go through all the detail here in a webinar, but the most specific area I want to talk about right now is the properties area. This is where you truly determine how the placement test will be distributed to your students. Now, with the 2 minutes I have left, let me highlight some of those popular options we have. Now, the default is what we call a homework or quiz. What this means is that the results of the placement tests are recorded in the Möbius gradebook, hard stop. You can review those placement test results at any time, but this is what it means. Anonymous practice above means that the results are never recorded in the Möbius gradebook. Students can use this for simply anonymous practice purposes. And we've seen this used in placement testing purposes where you want them to get used to the Möbius environment first. You would create a sample placement test, maybe with 10 questions. They can then take that placement test as many times as they want. Again, you don't know they're doing it because it's completely anonymous, but at least the students have that confidence to, I just want to make sure I know how the environment looks. I just want to get a feel for the platform. I mean, like I said, these are, students who have never gone to university before. They might just want to take that to get some confidence in the environment. Below that, though, we have one called a proctored exam type. This is the same thing as homework or a quiz where the results are recorded in the gradebook, but you can control the access to it. You can have them require a password to start it. You can have them require a teacher or a proctor to authorize them, based off their, maybe they have to prove their identity with their student card. Maybe they have to do it some other way. You can do that, and they have to actually get authorization to start it. You can have them use what's called a proctored browser. This is a lockdown mode where they can't go to other websites or programs during the placement test. A few other areas to talk about. I'll just go through them here. You can define number of attempts, whether it's 1 or unlimited. You can decide something in between if you want. You can change the time limit if you'd like to. This time limit was set by the MAA, though, so keep that in mind. You can modify it if you want to, though. You can also change the feedback they receive after. Do they see their score on the placement test? Do you want to show them which questions they got right and wrong? You can change that as well. Again, the defaults are here from the MAA. You need to find a cutoff score if you'd like right here. You can include start dates and end dates. You can even restrict feedback until a certain time. More importantly, though, you can even set the grading message. So what they receive when they finish the placement test. And it can even be conditional if they pass or not pass the cutoff score. So if with this pass-fail message, you can have them do something else or not do something else, depending on if they pass or fail the cutoff score for the placement test. And with that whole idea of a cutoff score, what we've seen some customers do is they even connect placement tests together so that, if you want us to just do multiple placement tests, they'll be released to them if they pass or do not pass previous placement test scores. And that's really cool here. So with this advanced policies area, you can say, okay, this placement test I'm designing, they can only access it if they've passed a previous one. Or, maybe it's a remediation test, they will access this if they didn't pass a previous one, right? So you can truly connect placement tests together. And with our really cool pricing model where students get unlimited attempts at placement tests, this is very useful to include. So with that in mind, I'm going to go back to the slide deck here and pass things back to Chelsea.
Yeah, thanks, Johnny. Great job. I always learn something when I'm watching Johnny present on the Möbius platform or on the placement test suite. He's kind of one of our all-stars here at Digital Ed, and it's great to have him present his knowledge whenever he can. So we do have a couple questions in the Q&A. We do have just enough time to cover some of them. Johnny, maybe this is a good question to start with that came in. So with the placement tests being pre-built by the MAA, and yes, modifiable, but so with this placement testing being designed for students from a variety of backgrounds, so that's educationally, socially, geographically, like again, that background diversity, how does this solution protect against bias?
Yeah, so it's an important topic that the MAA has provided an official statement for. And essentially what it says is that for the concepts test that I talked about, when you validate those items, when they were validating these items to assure that students interpret the exam items consistent with the designer's intent, the interview subjects included both female and male students. They included students from different races and non-native English-speaking students as well. So the wording on these questions was refined until all groups of students consistently interpreted the items consistent with the designer's intent. So as I mentioned before, those concepts writing this test, they contain more word problems, more theoretical questions, and I apologize, my voice is going, but that was the intent. Was they used a variety of people to interview to make sure they made sense. For the skills-based ones, the MAA had a panel of educators from all sorts of schools across North America on the project team when they built those questions, right? So the tests then were run through several pilot programs and field tested, and they revised them as needed. So that's the response to that question, Chelsea.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, good coverage over all the types of tests, and to show that it's a very well-rounded opportunity for evaluation. We did, as expected, I think we all expect this, and this is always a burning question for people, is what is the cost per student? Is the question that came in.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we Digital Ed charges per student account, where each account can take as many placement tests as they want during the 12-month license period. If you want specific testing, placement testing quotes for your school, it obviously depends on volume and frequency. So do reach out to us. Our email is on the screen right now, marketing@digital.com. Reach out to us, and one of our experts will reach out to you to give you a proper quote with the right amounts for everything. Yeah,
great. Another good question. Also, one person is asking, is the curriculum, so I assume by the word curriculum, I'd say the structure of the testing, is it based on the American or Canadian systems?
It's based off the American systems.
Yeah, and I guess with it being the MAA, the Mathematical Association of America, it's not clear if that's like America or North America or what that really means. So thanks for clarifying.
And even to a little bit beyond that, it is based off the American system, of course. But with that in mind, the MAA does have members across Canada and the US. And to my knowledge, when they did this field testing, for the skills and concepts test where they were interviewing students, like I mentioned before, they didn't just talk to, American students, right? They talked to people across North America and the world even to make sure things made sense. So while the content itself is more geared towards American universities and colleges, there's definitely overlap amongst Canada too. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, wonderful. And then, another question here. So if the person customizes their test, so yes, right, again, those tests are pre-built, but if they're customized and the person has the author has added their own questions or replaced some of the questions with their own, how do they then measure the performance of those changes? Yeah,
it's a good question. So in general, the placement test provided the MAA, they normalize the cutoff scores to start at 50%. But if you yourself decide to make changes to the questions or the placement tests themselves, like the delivery options, you'll need to do what they recommend is a year-over-year analysis to determine the appropriate cutoff scores for the new test and whether all the new questions are working well together. Now, of course, because Möbius has tools like the Möbius Gradebook and Möbius Analytics and item statistics, it makes it easy to do. And you can easily analyze the results and adjust and iterate as needed from term over term or year over year, depending on how often you deliver these placement tests.
Okay, yeah, great. Okay, we are at time. That was a great rapid fire of the showcase of the Möbius MAA Placement Test Suite. Wanted to thank everybody for your time. Thanks for the great questions. And stay tuned for the recording if you weren't able to make it today, and then share it with colleagues. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.